Okay, let's get keyed in here. We're going to talk about a profile on President James Garfield. Remember, Garfield was the dark horse candidate that got elected president because the Republican Party could not really decide on a good candidate. He actually kind of won an upset victory here, so we'll tell you a little bit about him. James A. Garfield was born in Ohio on November 19th, 1831. We've had a lot of presidents from Ohio, James Garfield being one of those. He was born in Ohio on November 19th, 1831. And he was the youngest of 5 children. So James A. Garfield was born in Ohio on November 19th, 1831. He was the youngest of 5 children. And unfortunately, his father died when he was just 2 years old. So he grew up most of his life without a father. The loss of the father caused tremendous hardships, especially financially for the family. So James Garfield found himself working to help support the family throughout his teenage years. So he was forced with the rest of his siblings to work. Had some serious hardship in the family because of the loss of the father. And he worked as a teenager, but then had to return home because he contracted malaria and got very, very ill. So during his teenage years, he had to quit working and return home because he had contracted malaria. And it took him some time to recover, and he continued his studies, and he eventually graduated from high school and then enrolled at a place called Western Reserve Institute, which is now known as Hiram College, which was in Ohio. Couldn't go very far to college because they were not well-to-do. So after working as a teenager, he returns home, ill with malaria. After his recovery and his graduation from high school, James Garfield enrolled at Western Reserve Institute, which is now known as Hiram College. You know, Rocky Mountain College, my alma mater, was once called Billings Polytech Institute. Colleges were known as institutes way back. Rocky was founded in 1876. And those colleges in that time weren't called colleges, they were called institutes. And that's why you have Western Reserve Institute. And most of those colleges, like Rocky, changed from Billings Polytech Institution to Rocky Mountain College. Well, the Western Reserve Institute became known as Hiram College. He attended Hiram College for 3 years, and then he transferred to Williams College in Massachusetts. So he attended Hiram College for 3 years, and then his senior year he transferred to Williams College, which was in Massachusetts, and he actually stayed there for 2 more. So he went to 5 years of college. The first 3 at Hiram College, then left during his senior year and stayed 2 years at Williams College. Why would he stay 2 years if he was a senior? Just out of curiosity. Anybody know that?
He met a girl.
Close. He actually got a doctorate, and what he did is after he earned his degree at Williams College, he went back to Hiram College and served as a professor of ancient languages and literature. So he spent the 2 extra years at Williams College, and the reason he went to Williams College in Massachusetts rather than finish at Hiram is because he wanted to be a college professor. And he graduated from Williams College in 1856, and then he returned to Hiram College as a professor of ancient languages and literature. It was kind of interesting because in just 1 year, he had made such a mark on the college, he had done such a good job, that in 1857, at just the age of 26, he was hired at Hiram College as the president of the college, which is pretty amazing. First, the age of 26, and secondly, he only served as a professor for 1 year. So they were very impressed with him and his possible leadership skills. So after teaching as a professor for 1 year, in 1857, at the age of 26, James Garfield was hired as president of Hiram College. Well, Kendrick, on November 11th of 1858, he married Lucretia Randolph, who is the daughter of an Ohio farmer. So on November 11th of 1858, James Garfield married Lucretia Randolph, who was the daughter of an Ohio farmer. And the couple eventually had 7 children. So on November 11th of 1858, Garfield marries Lucretia Randolph, who was the daughter of an Ohio farmer, and the Garfields had 7 children. Unfortunately, 2 of those children died as infants, which was fairly common in those days. The life expectancy was not near as long. So the Garfields had 7 children. 2 of those 7 died as infants. However, 2 of them had, ended up with some interesting careers. One of his sons, Harry Garfield, became president of Williams College, which is kind of ironic since his dad went there. And his dad was president of Hiram College. His son, Harry, kind of one-upped him because Williams College was much more prestigious, and his one son, Harry, became the president of Williams College. His other son, James Garfield Jr., served as Secretary of the Interior under President Theodore Roosevelt. We'll be getting to him pretty quick. So his other son, James Garfield Jr., served as Secretary of the Interior under President Theodore Roosevelt. So he had a couple of his sons that did some pretty big things. Harry, president of Williams College. James Jr. served as Secretary of the Interior under President Theodore Roosevelt. Now, if you look at the timeline here, President Garfield is going to serve in the Civil War after his time as president of Hiram College, and he advanced very quickly and ended the war. When the war ended, he had the rank of Major General. Okay? So James Garfield served in the Civil War, left his position as president of Hiram College to serve in the Civil War. He quickly advanced in rank during the Civil War, and he eventually left the military with the rank of Major General. Now, I want you to listen to his start of his political career and listen to the dates in which he was elected and see what you think. The first 2 political positions he served, first he was elected to the Ohio State Senate. Now, you know Mike Greer, who was a lawyer here, that's what he serves in, the Wyoming State Senate. So it wasn't a U.S. Senator, he was in the Ohio State Senate. Okay? And he was elected to that position in 1859. So his first political position was he was elected to the Ohio State Senate in 1859. The second position he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1862. So after serving as president of Hiram College, he goes into politics. His first elected position is to the Ohio State Senate, and he's elected in 1859. And his second position, he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, representing Ohio in 1862. What do you notice about those dates? What? Yeah, but think of the dates and history. What's happening in 1859 and 1862?
Oh.
What's happening?
Scandals?
What?
Scandals?
No.
The war.
Civil War.
Still?
And so he was elected to these 2 positions while serving as an officer in the Civil War. Politics doesn't end during war. You have elections. And so he actually was elected while serving in the Civil War to both of those positions, which is kind of interesting. So he's elected despite the fact he's still serving in the Army during the Civil War. Now, he was very successful in the House of Representatives. How long is a representative's term, Elizabeth? You know, if you're elected to the House of Representatives, how long is your term?
I don't know.
2 years.
Take a guess.
4 years.
No,
2.
not 6. 2. 2 years. He was, think about this, he was re-elected to the House 8 times, which means he was elected to the House 9. So he was very successful. He served 9 two-year terms in the House. That's pretty good. Usually in that period of time, you can make enough people angry, they don't re-elect you. So if you're re-elected 8 times, you must be doing a good job. Well, after being re-elected to the House, what does he set his eyes on, which most do?
Family.
He wants to be elected to the, not the presidency yet,
The Senate.
the Senate. So he runs for the Senate and wins election as a United States Senator from Ohio. So he serves 9 terms in the House and then is elected to the U.S. Senate. Now, if you remember, during this time we had an impeachment trial, remember, of President Andrew Johnson. And remember, Edmund G. Ross made the final vote of not guilty and saved Johnson's political career. Just so happened that James Garfield was involved as a senator in that impeachment trial, and he voted guilty. He voted guilty to impeach or to remove Andrew Johnson from office. So during the impeachment trial of President Andrew Johnson, Garfield voted guilty. Okay? Well, we know he was elected president in 1880 because we talked about that already. And during that presidency, on July 2nd of 1881, he was scheduled to attend his 25th class reunion from Williams College. So as President of the United States on July 2nd, 1881, President Garfield was scheduled to attend his 25th class reunion at Williams College. And how did presidents travel in those days?
Carriage.
Well,
Train.
not train, yeah, because carriage short distance, train long distance, they didn't obviously fly at that time. So he's in a railway station. And a stranger steps up and fires 2 pistol shots at him, yelling out, "I am a stalwart, and Arthur is president now." So as President Garfield is walking through a railway station on the way to his 25th class reunion at Williams College, a stranger walks up to him, fires 2 pistol shots at him, and yells, "I am a stalwart, and Arthur is president now." Who's Arthur again? Vice President, who was a stalwart. Remember, they balanced the tickets. So this fella that takes 2 shots at Garfield yells out, "I am a stalwart, and Arthur is president now." The man that fired the shots was Charles J. Guiteau, and he was immediately arrested and charged for shooting the president. So it wasn't like we had a mystery here. The attempted assassin was right there. He fires the 2 shots and yells, "I am a stalwart, and Arthur is president now," and he's immediately arrested, Charles J. Guiteau, and charged with assaulting the president. Now, of the 2 bullets, one merely grazed his arm, caused little damage, if any. 1 bullet grazed his arm. Unfortunately, the other bullet lodged deep into his back near his spine. And surgeons, and remember this is a different time period, could not locate the bullet to get it out. Okay? So the first bullet grazes his arm, the other bullet lodges deep in his back, and surgeons cannot find it to remove it. They even bring in Alexander Graham Bell, who invented what? Telephone, who also had experimented with listening devices, and even brought in Alexander Graham Bell with one of his listening devices to try to provide assistance in finding the bullet. They did not have X-ray at that time. It was not a possibility. So I'm not sure exactly what Alexander Graham Bell would have been listening for, but they brought him in to try to locate the bullet with one of his inventions. He had some sort of electrical device that it was, I think, was somewhat similar to what you'd call, you know, what do you call a Geiger counter, or you go and you look for metal detector type thing, and they were hoping to put that device over the back and hear where the bullet was, and no avail. Didn't happen. So Garfield lay in bed for 80 days with that bullet lodged in his spine. Garfield laid in bed for 80 days, and they just could not locate him. Now, according to historians, he remained very calm. He was cheerful throughout these 80 days. But what finally set in that caused him problems? With that bullet. Infected. Became badly infected. And because of that infection, President Garfield died on September 19th, 1881. So because of that infection and not getting that under control, and not being able to locate the bullet, President Garfield died on September 19th, 1881, and was eventually buried in Cleveland, Ohio. September 19th, 1881, buried in Cleveland, Ohio. Now, historians also note, as I mentioned, if they'd had the X-ray machine and some modern antiseptics like they do today, he probably would have lived through this assassination attempt, more than likely, and probably could have served after a period of recovery. But unfortunately, medicine was not like it is today, or even like it was with new advances in the 1920s, which we'll be talking about, and because of that, we lose a president. Well, after Garfield's death, Charles Guiteau goes to trial not for attempted murder, but for murder. They keep him in jail to see the outlook. And he acted like a madman throughout the entire trial. And because he acted crazy, what did his attorney try to do? Yeah, try to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. Well, that didn't work very good. The trial lasted 10 weeks, and the verdict took just about an hour to announce. Now, that's a pretty short time, because when you go to trial, you have to get all the jurors to vote the same way, right? It's got to be unanimous. So sometimes this will take hours and hours and sometimes days. Well, it was pretty cut and clear, and it only took about an hour after the 10-week trial to get a guilty verdict on Charles Guiteau. He was sentenced to hang, which he did in 1882. So Guiteau was convicted by the jury. He was sentenced to hang and did hang in 1882. Well, Vice President Chester Arthur then assumed the presidency after 2 deaths. His wife actually had died in 1880, and now the president had died in 1881. So as a result, there was no first lady during the rest of Arthur's presidency. We did not have a first lady. And so Vice President Chester Arthur becomes the 21st President of the United States. He's a staunch stalwart, and remember, he would be one that would oppose Garfield's policies. Okay? Here's Chester Arthur right here. Okay? So we now have a stalwart president who the views of his constituents would be opposite of that of the President of the United States. Now, this was kind of interesting because when Charles Guiteau yelled, "I am a stalwart and Arthur is president now," while he shot President Garfield, that was something that haunted Chester Arthur the rest of his life. He just felt somewhat responsible. And so you might think that when he carried on Garfield's presidency that he would change things up because he was a stalwart. He actually carried on the presidency as he thought Garfield would have done, rather than change. Now, you can imagine, what did the stalwarts think of him after his term ended? What were they considering? Traitor, basically. I mean, here you had your chance to go in and get our philosophy going while you were president, and you chose to be a traitor, so to speak, and carry on the presidency as you believe President Garfield would have done. So his actions were admirable, they were courageous, but it really resulted in political suicide. He would never be active in politics again because he had lost total support of his constituents by doing what he did. And historians will tell you the reason he did is because he felt so guilty about what Guiteau had yelled during the assassination. Okay, so he was a short-term president for sure. Okay, well that'll take us then to the election of 1884. 1884. So Arthur fills out the remainder of Garfield's term, and we have a new election. Well, do you think Arthur wanted to run for his own term? He actually did. He actually did want to run for his own term. Well, the stalwarts were so angry with him, they wouldn't support his nomination. Okay? So he never really had a chance. But he did want to run for his own term. But he had made so many enemies within the Republican Party, especially the stalwarts, that he never had a chance, which was probably good, because what he didn't know when he wanted to run for his own term is he had a fatal kidney condition. So if he would have received his party's nomination and would have been elected president, he would not have lived throughout the term he would be given. Somewhat fate. But the Republicans are angry at him, especially the stalwarts. They will not support his nomination. So they nominate James G. Blaine for the presidency. Remember, he was one of the half-breeds, and he ran once before. James G. Blaine was the nominee for the Republican Party in the